everything.
Perfection and the concept of perfection to defend your point, but you have not defined the most crucial of points you use to defend your point. So I can give you my...
My perfection is general. Around the world, so many will agree with me that the earth and the sun on a perfect place that we survive.
Again, we talked about...
I'm not talking about specific cases that things happen in a certain time.
We already discussed that the number of people that agree with something does not mean that this thing is correct. A lot of people
It can be 100 billion, 200 million, but the earth is 7.5 billion, my friend. I'm talking generally.
Sure, but if you're talking generally, then you're not talking at all.
If you want me to go define perfection,
yes,
then we can define it in subjectively as well. But I'm talking about objectively.
Okay, give me an objective definition of perfection.
That the earth and the sun is in a good, perfect place that we survive on.
See, the problem with that definition is that it's circular reasoning. You're including the definition of perfection. You're including the word perfection when defining perfection. That's like me saying...
Then I can say perfect means so many things. The word perfect, which I think two things is so balanced and works, I take word perfect and I put it there. That's my definition.
That's circular reasoning.
It's not.
It is. That's like, let me give you an example. It's
a logical reason.
No, it's circular. It's actually the counter. It's actually a fallacy. That's the opposite of logic.
I don't know.
So that's like me defining a squirrel by saying a squirrel is a being that looks like a squirrel. I mean, I just said nothing, and that's the problem with your definition. You are saying a squirrel is a creature that looks like a squirrel. That's the same thing you used in your definition.
No, I didn't.
Yes, because you said perfection is when two things are at the perfect distance from each other. So you used the word perfection to define perfection. You're very welcome to offer a different definition of perfection if you want. It's not a problem. We can talk about something else while you think about how would you define perfection.
Now you ask me a question, I have to think.
Absolutely.
No,
that's what I'm saying. Please take a moment, think about perfection. We can discuss something else.
Can I throw a concept out there for you just to illustrate something different? Imagine all of us buy lottery tickets and you win the lottery.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it the odds of you winning the lottery are pretty slim? You know, it has to be an exact set of numbers. It has to be a specific date and time. You could say that this isn't a coincidence. The fact that I won the lottery with such a low probability is a perfect set of events that led to this case. That, in a logical sense, is called a survivor fallacy. Just because you won the lottery doesn't mean that it was a system that led to you to winning, or that you did something special.
No, but I'm not talking about lottery.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's a similar thing. It's just the fact that humans have survived in an environment that is largely designed to kill us. Is not a symptom of the fact that the environment is perfectly designed for humans. It's just that we've survived. And again, you have to recognize humans as a species at a point on the Earth's history didn't exist, and it's very likely in the future humans might not exist either. So again, the fact that we are alive today is a temporary thing. It's not a permanent thing, and all of us die. People die all the time.
We can speculate future whatever we can. I know that, but I'm saying
it's not future speculation, it's also past observation.
At the moment, as a human being, when you live in the present, and when you live as a human.
So perfection is time-bound then?
Perfection
is time-bound. So we're talking, okay, humans didn't exist in the past, potentially...
In materialistic way?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a start.
Good. Yes.
So we're starting somewhere, okay.
I say that this perfection, what I call, is designed to be...
Do you have any proof of design?
Sorry?
Do you have any proof of design? How would you know that something is designed? Worse is something is not designed.
Design, for me, I would say that...
And how do you know it's designed for you?
If I know, if my joints were not as joints, and I had a straight hand, I had to eat like an animal because my joints have a specific design has been made. My mouth and nose is designed that I can smell the food and I eat it. Imagine if we like that, or if we were a random selection, our mouth would have been next to our anus. That wouldn't have called a design. But our mouth, and I mean the way that our sweat is salty, and we have an eyebrow here, so it doesn't go inside our eyes, I call it a design.
Good. Let me give you a few counterexamples of why the human body is actually a shit design and work in progress. Who in their reasonable mind would put sewage next to pleasure?
No, that's your point. That's your understanding.
I have another example.
That's
Why?
your
Wait,
understanding.
let me give you another
That's your
example.
understanding.
Well, I could say the same. That's just your understanding.
I'm giving general,
So can I
but
give
you're
you-
telling
Can I give you a simpler one?
Go on.
Any of you guys heard of the left laryngeal nerve?
Oh yeah, perfect example. Actually.
So there's a nerve that goes from your brain down underneath your aorta and goes up to the larynx. In a giraffe, that nerve is about 15 to 20 feet long. It's a very roundabout way instead of the nerve going from here to here. Now, why would that actually happen?
No, it doesn't mean that we don't know giraffe and us has a wire inside us, like same. It doesn't mean that we just popped out.
No,
No, but that does mean it's not designed.
that the design is far from optimal. I mean, why would you go all the way around rather than just go in a straight line?
And you know what's interesting? If you run simulations of any kind,
But then I can say our intellect is limited.
Sure.
Because at the moment we might not even found the things that what our body can do.
And with the same intellect, you're concluding that something is designed and perfect, which is limited.
No,
Which
but
is
I
equally
get
faulty.
I get my perfection that from an
You
objective.
still haven't defined perfection to use that word.
For me, this earth, this life is amazing. It's beautiful. It's perfect. We can be nice. We can have pleasure. We can eat. We can go anywhere we want. I mean, for me, as a human, I cannot see in the past history, or I cannot see in the future that we are the best creature at this moment of time.
According
that
to
we
what?
can be so
wait,
good.
we're the best creature according to what criteria? Because if we're looking at the best creature with the longest neck, the giraffe takes the cake. If you're looking at the creature that can best survive in a hostile environment, then the trichomia is the best. If we're looking at the creature that can fly the fastest, then it's the eagle. What's the name?
Bald eagle?
The bald eagle.
No,
if
I'm
we're looking
talking
at
about
the
the creature who sits around the table. They can rip apart each other, but if they think deeper, they can become friends. They can build civilizations. They can write Shakespeare.
right?
They can build rockets to go to Mars. I'm talking about that sort of creature.
So why are those more relevant than the ability to survive, which is the most fundamental thing you need to do any of those things?
No, I'm not saying as a human we have to do these things. Our ancestors lived without mobile. They survived, they lived.
And some of them
50, 60
didn't?
years. Okay, some of them they didn't, I know, but they had their own. I know that our humanity, what we got mind, our intellect, our knowledge can go further and further and further. It doesn't mean that our nature changes. The
It does.
greed, the jealousy.
It does.
It doesn't.
It does. Let me give you an example.
I know, but how, please?
Okay, give
please.
me. Sure. So, is anyone here aware that there were multiple there were multiple hominid species before the Homo sapiens became the dominant species on Earth, right? So there were actually multiple hominids. A hominid is just something that is like a human, but not exactly. A Neanderthal is not a prehistoric human. It is literally a different genus of the Homo species, right? And then you have Homo sapiens. We are the Homo sapiens, you had the Homo neanderthalis, you had the Homo philippus, and so on and so forth, right? So all of these creatures.
I don't know much about that, so.
I mean, your lack of knowledge isn't, an argument. Let me explain that further. So, it's not exactly known how exactly these species went extinct and we survived. However, what is absolutely known is that we interbred, and the modern Homo sapiens is not the Homo sapiens that existed like a few million years ago, but we interbred and changed as a consequence. So you'll still find certain humans that have a certain proportion of Neanderthal genes that have different inclinations to people who will be almost exclusively Homo sapien, right? What does that tell you? That tells you that human nature is malleable and changes. Number two, the things that we used to value changed over time, not just because of evolution, but also because of cultural changes. So, for instance, the object of beauty used to be obesity, because obesity meant that you can support a fertile offspring and have a higher chance to survive in conditions of scarce food or any other problem, like enduring more extreme conditions.
Having
so on
blackened teeth was considered beautiful at one point.
Right, having tan skin or darker skin was considered as an advantage because the original humans came from somewhere around Ethiopia, and of course, having darker skin means you are less isolated to UV and so on and so forth. Second, as creatures evolved, we evolved a proclivity towards social interaction and building, I would say, packs, but
You're
also
telling me physical things, bro. I'm talking about the innate thing.
these
The
are part of
greed.
it. Look,
no.
Look.
No.
Anything. Let me just tell you this. Anything that is innate has its origin or stems from something that is physical. So, for instance, if I change the chemistry of your brain, that will change your personality, and that will change your intelligence. That will change everything about you. If I remove your frontal cortex, like in the example of in psychology, the principal case study for neuroplasticity was Phineas Gage. He had literally a metal rod went through his frontal cortex due to a railroad accident, and he lost his ability to inhibit his desires, right? He literally became, quote unquote, I'm not saying literally, he literally sort of, quote unquote, became less human, right? What this means is that any change to what you would call human nature has its source in a physical medium, which would be the brain, the nervous system, the hormonal system, and the neurotransmissional system. I myself was suffering from chronic insomnia, which was just basically my body's inability to regulate melatonin, which you secrete, for instance, before when the sun goes down, when you have like lack of sunlight. This changed me mentally. Like I was mentally.
I'm not talking about specific cases. I'm telling
no, but
you
these are
again,
all examples
no.
of a general.
When Mayans or whoever got their enemies,
Sorry, what?
The ancient Mayans.
The ancient Mayans or
Right.
whoever, they got their enemies.
Right.
They slaughtered them. They had the greed for
Right.
power. They had jealousy from other tribes. They stored gold. They had everything. Now, in 2019, people fly a drone and put a bomb and can kill 20,000 people like this.
Right.
So my point is, our nature will never change. We have the same nature as thousands of years as we have today. Our perception of beauty or our skin color, I know it changes from generation to generation and getting involved, and the world has become small and we got intermarriages and everything. I'm not talking about that.
Sure, okay.
The humanity itself, the nature, you're telling me that as humanity has progressed to 2019, our nature changed as well. I say no, that's
Okay,
wrong.
and let me tell you why.
That's wrong.
Let me just.
Countries are getting invaded. Millions and millions of people are dying. Poverty is strive in the world.
Sorry, it's what?
Inequality, poverty is up.
No, it's
there.
not. It's been decreasing
Okay.
for the past
Go
200
to
years.
Africa, go to Bangladesh,
Oh,
go
wait,
to
wait,
India.
wait,
go
wait.
to-
Okay, let me.
No.
Okay,
Wait.
finish.
Let me
first.
finish. please.
Okay.
So I'm saying the nature of the greed, jealousy, envy, and all these
Right.
never changed ever.
Okay.
When man was created, these things were there. It said control it and be good to your neighbor, be good to others, be kind, be generous from the beginning. But I say, as a human being, when I look at the world, I see the same injustice in 2019 that I saw in the Pharaoh's time, or in the Mayans' time, or any time we go. Our nature doesn't change. Our lifestyle changes. I get you, bro. We get developed, we technologically and all that. But I'm saying the modern humanity or the atheist or whoever liberalist or whatever, they think that as we developed with our lifestyle and with technology, our nature has changed. You said that.
Yes, it
I
is.
said that's wrong.
Why?
It's not. You can't change nature.
Okay, let me give you an example. First and foremost, the only.
Does that nature has changed ever?
No, before. Yes. Yes. Let me give you an example. So, first and foremost, before I even. First, I have to address your fallacies, then I'll answer your question. Before everything, the only constant in nature is change. Change is literally the only constant in nature. Nothing in the existence of the biotic existence of the world, the ecosystem, has remained constant for very long. Change is the only constant in the world, right? Is that okay? Can you tell me that the world it is now has been the same billions years ago or will be in the future? That is just not correct. Things have always changed, and change is the only constant in the world for anything, really. Now, let me go back. The issue with your the fallacy you keep sort of bringing up and is sort of apparent in all the examples you brought up is that just because certain things have remained constant does not mean that other things haven't changed. So, for instance, if I say, well, my color, the color of my hair is the same as it was since I was an infant, that means that I haven't changed since I was an infant.
No, my point is killing
right.
Thousands of years ago, killing wrongly was wrong at that time.
No, it wasn't.
Killing wrong.
Wait. Let me address this again.
Oh, yes.
Good. I'll let you speak, so let me finish my point.
Please, sorry, yeah.
Thank you very much. So, what I'm trying to say is, very simply, I'm not saying that just because people used to do something and don't do it today, that means that it wasn't moral in the past, but it's moral now. I'm not saying that, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm only saying that people's proclivities or people's inclinations towards things changes. There is a moral progression over time. Okay? Now, you said that the human nature doesn't change, and I'm saying, yes, it changes. Just because one element hasn't changed doesn't mean that the organism as a whole hasn't changed. So, for instance, a butterfly is a good example. People think that a caterpillar goes through a complete metamorphosis to be a become.
You cannot compare human to a butterfly, bro.
This is an analogy.
Have you ever seen five cockroaches having a coffee and talk about physics?
Wait.
They don't.
Let me finish.
No,
because you also
look.
This is an analogy. This is not. Look, this is not a comparison. This is an analogy. An analogy.
Yeah, but that analogy, you could say this human is like this human. But you're a butterfly. You're saying a life.
Yes,
of
but
a
I'm not
butterfly.
comparing humans. I'm not comparing a butterfly to a human. I'm comparing the principle of.
Yeah, but for me it doesn't work. Why a principle of a butterfly? You're fitting on a principle of a human being.
And
who
again,
sacrifice, who loves, who steals, who cheats.
That just means you're not listening. I'm not comparing.
A butterfly can't do these things.
I'm not comparing a butterfly to a human. I'm using the example of metamorphosis as an example of a certain aspect of a system changing but others remaining the same. Doesn't mean that the system overall hasn't changed. So, for instance, do you understand now? I'm not comparing a human. I'm just using the example of metamorphosis as an example of how a system changes over time.
No,
Are
but
we
I
clear
think
now?
that's a getaway answer.
Okay, you want me to use a different example? Fine, let's use a human. I used a human before.
Okay.
I can use a human, no problem. So, just because my hair, the hair color of my hair, has remained constant from my birth until today, doesn't mean that the system overall hasn't changed. And that was your fallacy.
That's materialistic.
Wait.
That's materialistic.
Let me. Okay. I can. Just because I was afraid of falling or dark when I was a kid, and I am still now, doesn't mean my nature hasn't changed, because there are other things about me that have changed, and the number of things that have changed compared to the ones that haven't overwhelms the certain base element. So the system overall has changed. Just because certain elements have remained the same doesn't mean that the system hasn't changed. It's like, do you know the example of the ship of Theseus? No, okay. So, there's a parable that says, a ship went to sail, and it sailed for a very long time, and as storms and everything sort of broke it apart, certain pieces start to fall apart, and they repair them, right? By the end of the journey, every single piece of the boat that set out from the harbor has been replaced. Now, is this still the same ship, or is it a different ship? Because all of its elements have been replaced. Now, you could say, okay, well, the shipness of the ship has remained the same, but the elements have changed, right? And that you can use that point. However, even that isn't analogous to humans, because even human nature, not only over time, as in in the course of evolution, but also in the course of your life, has changed. You now are not the same you were 7 or 14, or I don't know how you old are, how far back I can go. Humans as a system within their lifespan change. also humans in any time scale, as long as they have existed, have changed. Their proclivities have changed, their moral views have changed. Our literal morality has evolved over time.
I disagree.
I mean, just because
Science
we are
is the same thing. Science changes
No,
all
but
the time.
no. With that ship question, first you said you changed the parts of the ship.
Yes.
I'm not denying on the way. The ship objectivity was to cross and to get to a point, to a certain.
Wait, why
And
are you
the
conflating?
shipness
Why are
was-
you conflating?
No, I'm not
function with-
conflating because the ship, when it got out of the dock and on the way, when they changed the parts, it was materialistic. It was the material of physical ship. But when the ship sailed, the objective was to get to the port and dock there.
Why are you
That
co-
has to be complete.
You're conflating function
No, but
with essence.
that's what I'm saying.
The purpose and
Greed,
components remain the
there is
same.
an essence in you.
Sorry.
Yeah, the purpose and components of that ship remain
Never
the same.
change.
Wait,
Never
but
change.
purpose is attributed. Purpose is not an innate.
No, purpose is designed.
No, purpose is attributed. Purpose is
By
not
who?
Purpose
innate.
is designed.
By people.
They attribute it.
Attribute
That
purpose.
seems an abstract thing. Purpose
Language is abstract, my
no,
friend.
No,
so
but purpose is a conscious decision
You
to
do a lot of
something.
gymnastic
You've
with
used-
words.
Yeah, yeah.
You
that-
so do you.
actually,
You
you're
using words you
inaccurate.
can't define,
No,
my
you're-
friend.
No,
you're-
you just
No, I think,
good, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, please
so,
continue.
Yeah. So I just came in at the end. You were talking about the ship and it being.
Are you
broken
familiar
apart
with
and
the
things
ship
like
of
that.
Theseus?
No, I heard all of it.
Yeah,
but-
okay, good.
But what was the general thrust you were trying to?
So basically,
Morality.
do you want?
morality.
No.
Morality, yeah.
We're
Let's
straight
go
a bit.
with
Yeah.
morality,
Yeah.
We start from morality, then we came to a creator, the pop
No. I think we're still far away from a creator.
Yeah.
What we are discussing. Do you want to summarize or should I?
You go ahead.
Okay,
go
thank
ahead,
you.
go ahead.
We were discussing whether the nature of humans changes over
And
time.
morality.
And morality is a component of that.
Yeah,
I would
of
say,
course,
yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, and the argument being discussed, or the proposition being discussed, is whether the nature of humans changes over time. He believes that human nature is static over time, regardless of any changes, and I'm saying no. With the changes in humans over time, so does their nature, because their physical change would attribute a natural change, because any change in your physiology equals a change in
I
your.
suppose you need to come to a
No,
common
no,
understanding
no,
of what
I
the
think you
term
got it
human
wrong.
nature means before you
Wait,
can.
because
No. I think my point is that, of course, if greed comes to you, you can try to not be greedy and try to. I'm not saying you can control, but my point was that when you go with it, that is there. The greed is there. If you want to go with the greed, if you want to go with jealousy, if you want to go with hatred, it's there. It never change. It's there. People hate people for nothing. Why?
No,
they never met.
That's
Bro.
not. It's not for nothing.
Bro.
Look. I'm not saying it's justified,
Okay.
but it's not for
What-
nothing. Right?
I've met people. They never met me.
Yes.
They never spoken with me.
Yes.
Just by the look, they might have looked in a certain way.
Right.
I'm saying.
But you already defined something they hate about you, the look. So it's not for nothing. There is a reason. It might be a
No.
totally
Our
stupid and
point-
unjustified
no.
reason, but it's not for nothing.
No, our point is if humanity goes with these things, greed and hate and jealousy, in humanity, it's innate, it's there. That will not change.
It's currently innate.
You can control it, yes.
No, but it's currently innate. That doesn't mean that these things have been here forever. For instance, let me give you an example. Do you think a squirrel can hate? Or any other
So
animal?
you're saying that it's a biological changes over time,
What do you mean?
like evolutionary changes, like people have changed physically due to whatever processes,
Sure. Okay.
and that's what leads to the change at the end.
Partially. That's one part of it. That's
Yeah,
absolutely one
because
part of
he's
it.
saying that through time, as humanity evolves, our nature for killing or for greed or for
when you say
these
our-
has changed as
when you
well.
say your
I'm
nature-
saying that will never change.
I would
And
just-
morality has to be objective, not subjective.
What I would say is your nature would be if you take somebody now and you take them out of society when they're a baby and you
Yes.
put them anywhere else, however they would act, that's their nature. right? So it would be without any of the constraints of like society and what they learn.
Isn't there such a thing as there's inherent natural attributes that we all share?
Nature and nurture.
And then there's environmental and sociological and genetic predispositions.
So we're
to
talking
put them
about
all
the
into
human
a pot.
nature, the
But
nature.
I think for me, I used to be an atheist, and I followed the route of my inclination and my appetites and things like that. So I didn't have a moral compass, and I ended up in a very bad place mentally, emotionally, physically. Now I believe in God. I have a map where I can govern and limit the choices I would make that I would have chosen if I didn't have the map. So what I'd like to know from an atheist is, how do you personally govern your moral choices beyond your inclination and your...
Is your ruler static or stretchable?
Yeah, yes. How do you determine your moral actions effectively?
I'll answer, but I just didn't hear you. You said
Your ruler, the morality ruler. Is
Okay.
it static or it can stretch through time?
Okay, I'll tell you. Can I answer his and then I'll address yours?
Yeah, they overlap.
Because this
Maybe
one is a
they'll
good
overlap.
sort of
Okay, yeah,
segue
yeah.
if you want.
Sure thing, yeah, but
Sure.
you personally. I'd be
Yeah,
interested.
absolutely. No, I understand the question is personal. So, you said if the ruler is stretchable, right?
Yeah.
I would put it this way. The ruler exists, okay? It's on the table. But let's say I'm in a dark room, okay? The more knowledge I have, the sort of brighter my lamp is, right? And the more of the ruler I can see. So the less information, the less knowledge I have, the smaller the ruler is, the smaller parts of the ruler are visible to me. So I'll act in accordance to this, right? The more knowledge I have, the more of the ruler gets illuminated, and the more I see what is sort of moral and immoral. Does that analogy make sense? If you use the ruler analogy,
It makes sense in a way, but it can only give you how. It will not give you why.
what do you mean by why?
I'm saying that, I think you're saying that as we evolve, our knowledge grew, and we know how this world works. How. As much as knowledgeable
I would just separate evolution from increase in knowledge over time. Like those are two separate. Because you can continue to evolve without your
No, but it's
knowledge.
the thing
It's-
that
no,
it's-
no, 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 no.
Yeah,
It's
but you
connect.
can get to a level of knowledge, consciousness, where you get to a level of knowledge and consciousness, so you know systematically and categorically certain X, Y, Z, Z, and then you can go back to where you know nothing.
You're right.
You're right. And knowledge doesn't
Can you-
As
equate
much
to
as you
wisdom
know, you
either,
don't
does
know.
it?
You see,
No,
it's possible to do that.
I got you.
No, and
Some
to do
scholars
that,
say,
you know.
some scholars say, as much as
I
they
read
have,
that in
they
Chinese,
read,
but yeah, you could do
they
that.
just realize that how ignorant they are.
Yeah. You
no,
can
the
get
more
back
you
to
know,
the-
the more you know, the more you know you don't know. That's
No,
fine. That's the
no,
principle
no,
of
I'm
knowledge.
not saying
No, but
that.
then
I'm
it's,
not saying that.
You're not saying
I'm
that.
not saying that, no. I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, you can reach a stage of knowledge by, for example, I've learned a lot about Marxist theory.
Yeah.
But now I know a lot about Marxist theory, that there's a certain amount of predictability about my mind, and I'm not trying to do a psychological analysis here, where I know certain things and I say certain things and it's predictable. Well, you can get back to a stage where you can go back get back to where you didn't know what you knew in the first place about Marxist theory. If you understand what I'm saying.
Thanks for talking.
so
Yeah.
sorry we couldn't
No,
talk
sorry
more.
if
Yeah,
I
you
said
understand
anything.
what I'm saying?
Do you know English is my second language?
No,
So
absolutely
I might
understand.
put
When you get
words
to that
here and there.
stage-
and
No,
stuff
I'm just
like
I'm
that.
just saying I'm
That's
sorry
when
you
things
couldn't
can
continue
get
more, but I know you have more
where
other
you-
things to
No, I'm
do.
just
A
walking
certain
around.
amount of-
Thanks for talking. Yeah. Thanks, bro. Thanks a
Do you
lot.
think the ship? Does the ship exist or not in your view?
Oh, can I answer his question first, and then I'll answer
Yeah.
yours?
Before
Right.
I go, I'd like
So-
to know you personally
So,
how if you
personally-
came up with a moral choice right now. Let's say you're married,
Right.
Okay. You see somebody.
Oh,
who
can you
desire,
please use a different
no,
example?
No.
Okay.
And you know you won't get caught out.
Okay.
What is it that's going to restrain you from following your appetites and inclinations?
Right.
Bung that in as an example, but you speak as you feel.
Okay, I had a feeling you would say this, and the answer is sort of useless in a moral debate because the answer is principle. Principle.
Moral
So-
principle,
No, just character principle.
which definitely has a moral aspect to it.
No.
Right, tell
okay.
me more. Yeah?
Okay, I knew you were going to say this, and this is like the one exception where I cannot give a good answer. So I wouldn't cheat on my partner for matter of principle, a matter of character. So I don't want to be cheated on I don't want to be betrayed. I want to be able to trust the person I've chosen to be my partner.
Yeah. But your action won't change how she acts.
No, it won't.
If you do this.
It won't.
That's immaterial on a rational level.
Right.
That doesn't count.
I have a desire, above all else, to be a principled being or person.
Okay, yeah.
Principle is sort of literally, if I had to choose, like if you say what defines the person I am, I would choose principle and everything else was sort of irrelevant.
But do you I want to hear it, but do you disassociate that from a moral perspective? This is what I want
This
to
is the
understand.
only case I do.
The only
That's
case.
why I wanted. That's what I said. Please give me a different example.
Yes.
Can you give me something else?
I'm interested because you mentioned two words, principle and character.
Yes.
Now, for me, principle and character kind of epitomise a moral framework. I don't see how principle and character could be disassociated from some personal moral code that you have.
Because it's inherited.
Is inherited from your background, or?
Yeah, it's basically inherited from my background. So it's basically, there are very few things that like sort of like my family tradition has inherited.
Okay.
And the only thing that I can find consistently is principle. And like if you don't, like, it's almost like the golden rule, almost. It's not the golden rule, but it's almost.
Yeah.
Don't fuck people over, ever, under no circumstance. Death is preferable to having fucked someone over. And this is something that is...
Why?
It's inherited. It is my respect for the people who have come before me, raised me, gave me everything I ever wanted in life. Their only wish was that I continue this principle forward. And that's why I say, please, give me another
I'm really pleased, because you answered from the heart, and that makes a really good conversation.
No, but it's a shit answer in terms of ethics, because it's nothing to do with ethics.
For sure. But I still can't see how, despite how well you've explained your own personal set of circumstances and what led you to say what you said,
right.
how that can fit into this system that is outside of a moral framework.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say, because I think you're acting like the majority of society still are living off the residual fat of a Judeo-Christian moral framework, just like your parents perhaps were from their grandparents.
It's not exactly
when that goes, when it goes, how do you then build the new moral parameters?
But
you're
the one who speak the least. Yeah.
Say your parents taught you like differently. Say your parents taught you like the complete opposite of what you are claiming now, like the principles.
Right.
You would just be as right as you are now. Say your parents.
Yes. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that.
So both cheater and like and loyalist are equal in one sense. You're saying. They're both right.
I think it makes the most. I think that's
because it's a subjective argument you're using here.
It is.
Let's have a good conversation. I appreciate the way you answered
if I have to give the simplest answers is recognition that everyone is a sentient agent that has a preference towards pleasure.
For sure.
That I want to be treated the way other people want to be treated because I'm an egoistic altruist.
Sure.
And because I recognize that if I want someone to change, I need to be that change.
Could I say this? It'll take
So
1 second.
four things.
One second. The law and the prophets in Christianity is do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Golden principle.
Off duty and on duty. And
that's golden principle. Yeah. It's
Anyway,
older
God
than
bless.
Christianity, by the way. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that
Yeah.
it seems like what you're doing is you're taking the approach that what you should do is you should take each situation, or what my approach should be is, if there's no overarching moral framework that you're following, the right thing to do is to take each situation on its own merits and apply just what you've learned through your life to each situation.
I think you have to do that regardless.
But if you're going to say that your moral principles can be boiled down to something that doesn't include your personal, if it's an objective moral code, that doesn't include your personal experiences.
Here's the problem. When we're talking about objective and subjective, the issue with that is that you can have an objective fact, you can have an objective statement, but when you're talking about agents, perfect objectivity is impossible.
Right.
So objectivity in the sense of any actor acting upon something is basically, it's a contradiction. You cannot have a subjective actor acting absolutely objective, right? You can only have degrees of objectivity piled on your subjectivity, right? I don't think anyone would contest this, right? So, good. in that sense, I try to be as objective as possible, but my objectivity is based on my subjective knowledge, experiences, inclinations, etc. Right?
But are you claiming that you stated before that you do have some sort of objective framework, that you had some guiding principle?
Right, so I mentioned 4 guiding principles. So the first one is the recognition that every single sentient being is a sentient being that has an inclination towards pleasure or like a positive state, like being alive, rather towards a negative one, right? Second is that I recognize that if I want to be treated a certain way, I should expect to treat others the same way. So the golden principle, right?
But that doesn't apply to a situation that was brought up before.
Which one? Cheating.
If you know you're not going to get caught,
Yep.
you treating somebody
already
poorly
said-
won't treat you poorly.
I already said why that is such a bad example for me.
It's a bad example for you, but it's a good example overall.
Okay, I'll ignore I'll ignore my sort of like innate principle. I'll just answer on the basis. So, it doesn't matter that nobody will find out the action, because that's not true. 2 actors will find about the action. You and the person who is cheating.
But in this situation, if it basically what you're doing is like a risk calculation.
No,
there,
it's
where
not a
you're
risk.
gonna say-
It's a matter of ethical consistency and of principle consistency. So, the strength of any system is its consistency, right? It can be a system can be flexible, right? But it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be consistent, right? So just because a system is flexible doesn't mean it's consistent. That's like basic flexibility and rigidity. So the only
just get it here.
so the strength of any system that I wish others to apply should be its consistency. And if I want others to apply this system as rigorously as I do, then I'm at the very least expected to do the same.
Yeah, but what's forcing you to do that? It
I
seems
am.
like, for what reason though?
For the reason of
If you're
moral
first-
or ethical consistency.
So for the sake of consistency.
Sorry, I must say this. I've seen you on YouTube the other day. It's very
How's it
famous.
going, bro?
Oh shit, a celebrity.
Not really, no.
Can I have your autograph?
Just a little bit. Oh,
You're
nah.
just for the occasion, I think. With the
Modine, that's the real celebrity. Modine. Big up Modine. But yeah, I heard that you.
What are the other?
experts
Oh,
on
right,
Ukraine. Tell them
Ukraine,
about
yeah, that's it.
Ukraine, that's it.
I did too. So it's basically a recognition of sentience of everyone and sort of consistency, being ethically or philosophically consistent, being
Whether or not someone's watching.
whether or not someone's watching. That's right.
That's a
relevant.
principle that goes back.
But that's a very important detail.
Yeah,
I
we'll
know,
address
I'm
it
just
later.
saying, that's why I'm saying.
I'll first present everything, then we can
Let him-
deconstruct each other. The third element is basically the golden rule, right? Just very simple. I don't think I need to sort of explain what the golden rule is. And the third is sort of a very simple two-parter. So egoistic altruism and just the very fact that we have evolved as a social species, right? So the second part of this, we're evolved as a social species, primarily revolves on humans. However, it can extend to other non-human animals and even plants and so on and so forth. So just because we're a social species, that doesn't limit our moral consideration to us. That just means that these sort of interactions we have between us are more innate than others, right? And the second thing of that is altruistic egoism. Especially in today's age, like really fucking especially in today's interconnected and sort of globalized world where sort of we're very interconnected. I believe in interconnectedness even before globalism and all of that. So in today's world, it really, really benefits me if I help someone get to a certain stage where he can participate. So the whole reason for foreign aid is not purely altruistic. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but it is also a literal investment. So, for instance, I'll give you the example of Bosnia. So, for instance, Austria gives Bosnia free education for Bosnian citizens because, it invaded it, it was a colony of it, huge damages, blah, 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 so on and forth. The reason it gives free education is because cheap and highly intelligent labor and people who are just willing to work harder because of their sort of poor condition in their own country is usually from ex-Yugoslavian countries. If they have free education, which is sort of the biggest entry barrier for education, they will get educated. Because they have a better better country or better system to live in, which is like in Austria or Germany or wherever in the world, they will usually tend to participate there. And as a highly educated person, you know, they'll contribute and be even more grateful than a citizen who was just born there and assumes certain rights. They have to, quote unquote, earn these rights, which is actually not quote unquote. They have to earn these rights.
Yeah.
And if they go back in Bosnia, they're creating a more stable and more fertile ground for trade, resource extraction, and a stronger local union, because Austria still is politically and geographically entwined with Bosnia, and then Austria is entwined with Slovenia and sort of Germany and so on and so forth. Egoistic altruism makes sense today, and even before. Personally, I was inspired by the sort of notion of don't ask for whom the bell tolls, right? Because it really doesn't matter. Somebody just died somewhere in Africa, Asia, America. It doesn't matter. This person died. The effect of that is invisible to me. That does not mean that this effect does not take place. I don't know if this effect is positive or negative. Let's say Hitler died a few hundred years ago and I said, oh no, somebody died. Like, that's horrible. Just my inability to perceive this harm does not exclude me from saying, is this overall more likely to be good or bad? So those are the 4 principles of a sort of my ethical consideration. I'm sorry if this was longer than it was supposed to be. If I could just say those 4 things without explanation, I would have.
So can I posit a sort of devil's advocate point of view?
Absolutely, I love devil's advocate.
Why does morality and ethics have to abide by a rational framework?
The reason why morality or ethics, it doesn't have to. There's absolutely no have in that situation in the same way that you'd expect Hume's guillotine to work, that like an is doesn't equal an ought. However, an is should sometimes equal an ought, simply because rationality is the best tool or system we have to delineating, and I'm using this word as just generally as possible. I don't want to get into a debate about truth, because that's a whole bag of words no one can go into right now. Truth, or most likely reality, right? The more we are attuned to reality, or to how things are actually happening, the more we are able to make informed decisions, and the more we are able to affect things in a way that will contribute us now, future, whatever we want it to. So that's why rationality, and I believe the ship exists, by the way. It doesn't matter, it has changed. The ship exists.
Thank you.
Perhaps human rationality is bound to human morality, because humans have developed in more ways than simple animals. I greatly agree with you about the thing you spoke about, the morality in animals and in living beings. That's something I call evolutionary morality or genetic morality.
I think
it's
all
that gets
morality
accumulated.
needs to be, like evolutionary in a way.
Yes. It comes from my point that I made last Sunday, that life is moral by its definition. Because all life that is created, that destroys itself and destroys other life, simply ceases to exist.
Do you think morality exists without moral agents?
Without moral agents? Which moral agents?
You're a moral agent.
I'm a moral agent.
A creature that can delineate, oh god, I don't want to use right and wrong. An agent that can delineate the consequences of its, an agent that can delineate the consequences of its actions and understand the effect on other actors is a moral actor.
I think
I see you're looking in disagreement. Is that okay? Did I make a mistake?
No, I wasn't thinking a mistake. I was just thinking of the consequence of the thought. But please.
Morality beforehand, before the agent.
You have to be careful
Right, so
when you talk about
the agents
morality.
don't create the
because
morality or evolve with the morality. The morality's there, and then the agents have to apply the morality to themselves.
I believe with the first agent, with the existence of the first agent, the first life,
is
the
very
most rudimentary
subjective.
set of morality
What
is created.
is moral for me?
Which
not
is
to do
life
harm in
has the
certain
meaning,
fields,
and that
in
meaning, the
certain,
purpose is to grow or die.
environment.
And life doesn't
can be
destroy everything
moral
around.
for
That first
somebody
rule, do
else.
not destroy everything,
Because
is
we,
the first rule in
after
morality,
all,
from which
each
all other rules
of
come.
our faces
Let's
is
just
one
quickly
story.
listen to her, because
You
we'll
see,
be talking at the same time.
each face, one story. Therefore, we, as we go along through life, we go through struggle and we solve problems as they come along. Otherwise, if you start thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to lose my bank account? Then you become a neurotic individual. But if you solve the problem as they come along, then you live in a much more relaxed type of situation, and therefore your moral are according to the life project you have built for yourself. I personally, my life experience, have seen that each individual has its own morality, its own idea of what is correct and proper, and can differ from somebody else. I give you the example, for example, in the case of identity politics. We have
very modern topic, yeah.
Well, it is very modern because we are forced by the oligarchic powers to have some idea of racism and self-defensiveness, linked to self-defensiveness. Actually, racism doesn't help the masses, the Western masses especially, because it actually reinforces their right-wing agenda, anti-immigrant, anti-the-different, and anti-the outsider.
Right, before we go into the sort of area of politics, let's stick to the area of morality. Let's address this question first. Indeed.
I was just giving you an example.
No, it's fine. It's a fine example.
The example is this. For example,
I think I understand your.
I would say Latino, Jewish as well, but mostly black people, when they were enslaved, 400 years ago, they were enslaved. The first was Queen Elizabeth first, And when they were enslaved, they virtually lost their tribal identities.
Okay.
Once you lose your tribal identity throughout history, especially now, black people are quite entitled to have a race identity. Their identity as black people, the same the Jews. They were prosecuted towards history, so they are entitled to feel their Jewishness.
Wait a second, did you just say that the idea of racism, the idea of entitlement, of difference between races was created by capitalists, which is something you are against?
Don't take words out of my mouth. I'm talking to morality.
I'm telling exactly the same words that you said.
Let's address morality first, and then we can jump into the more
conversation will become very superficial if we go into race now.
Yeah, okay. Let me.
A point of view of me, my race, like the Jewish.
Okay. I think I understand.
It is morally right for them, seeing the history of persecution and slavery, to be identitarian.
Okay, let me tell you how. I'll tell you the moral principle, and then maybe you can extrapolate that something to that. Okay, so. You said that morality is intrinsically subjective, right? I would agree to the extent that I have to admit that every single moral agent is a subject, and it is impossible to be absolutely objective because you're by definition a subjective agent. You have your own experiences, knowledge, subjectivity, right? You can only take steps towards objectivity, such as trying to get as much empirical data, trying to avoid cognitive biases, and trying to propose as many falsifiable claims as you can, because if you have a falsifiable claim, as soon as it's falsifiable, you know it's not true. As long as it's not falsified, you can kind of hold on to it. Okay, now, the next thing is, you said everybody has their own morality. I would put a spin on that. So I was discussing with a gentleman earlier that says morality is a ruler and that's it. And I would say, the morality is a ruler, like a meter, like a calendar, whatever you want to call it, just like a fixed unit of measurement.
Before you ask.
Okay.
So
everything is explained.
What I would say is that you can maybe put that claim, but what I would say is maybe a better analogy would be this: you have a ruler on a table in a dark room. Okay, and you have a flashlight, and the flashlight just symbolizes the amount of knowledge, experience, and sort of intelligence you have. Maybe intelligence doesn't matter that much, but like knowledge and your experiences, your perceptions. Excellent, perceptions. Right. The stronger your light is, your flashlight, the more of the ruler you can see at once, right? And the smaller your knowledge, experience, and perception is, the more sort of biased you are, the more limited you are.
Your
Right?
opinion? This is your...
It's a comparison.
I'm just using like
It's a metaphor.
so like that's what I mean. Like the more light, the more light you have on the ruler, the more ethical you can be, because you understand more. You can choose to ignore morality. That is always an option.
That is if the absolute ruler does exist.
Right.
my
So
question. My
okay,
question is who put the
I'll
ruler
address that absolutely.
Talking about knowledge, the same thing as knowledge. More knowledge you have,
Yes.
the more after you are,
Yes. The more possibilities you have.
more possibilities you have.
Right, absolutely, and the more you can combine and perceive. So I would say that morality is subjective to the extent of how much of the ruler you can see. Now, as for the ruler, is the ruler a physical thing? And I don't mean the physical as in like ruler. Does it actually exist? I think the ruler actually exists, but the very fact that we are all limited in our perception to see the ruler, and we might be looking at it from different angles. We can never see the full ruler. So the best thing we can ever do is like get together and like all like shine the flashlight, see which angle we're looking for it, and try to find the quote-unquote best angle. This is always an imperfect exercise, but
Best thing we can do is to not point all the flashlights in the same spot, because we won't see more of the ruler.
Right, I have to agree with that. It is a physically and analogically good example.
Metaphor. I came from your metaphor. It's a very good metaphor.
The problem I have with morality is, since it's a subjective matter, you
can make it more objective.
You can. You know how? You can make
like
it
the example
more
I just gave.
objective by referring to a very simple axioma that is very easy to understand even at a very early age, and it is understand the difference between right and wrong. All of us have a conscience. All of us have a conscience, and the conscience.
That's a bit simplistic.
It is.
That's like saying being good by doing good things.
Exactly. Be goody, don't be baddy.
I didn't finish.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
The conscience itself is that inner voice that tells you to do a certain thing is wrong.
Do you think everybody says the same conscience?
Is not very clear-minded about what is right, but it knows what is wrong.
Do you think so?
Well, even criminals, they always
Not all of them.
hide their crime because they know it's wrong.
But what about
You can say
sociopaths?
because they fear. Even a sociopath.
Oh, sorry, not sociopath, psychopath. Sociopath is still functioning.
Well, they will still hide their crimes.
Wrong doesn't necessarily mean evil.
Look at
There's a difference between the
Jeffrey
psychopath.
Dahmer, Bundy,
Both
psychopaths.
sociopaths.
Very bad level of
has the right to speak.
sociopathy. They
Yes, of course.
still hid their crime.
But they're not. They're sociopaths. I absolutely think the distinction between the state of sociopathy and psychopathy is important, because sociopathy is someone who understands but does not empathize, and the psychopath is someone who literally doesn't understand. They lack this capacity, which is like
But at the basis,
born monsters
at the
to a certain
basis
extent.
of this
And
type
sociopaths are raised
of
monsters.
personality, the foundation of these personalities is narcissism. They are 100% sure they will never get caught. Actually, the reason why you have so many serial killers, especially in the Western world, is because they are convinced that they are not going to get caught.
But that's
why
not
they
actually true,
committed
madam.
crime.
That's not actually true, madam. The only reason why we know about more psychopaths in the West is just because they have a more developed legal and policing system.
That's it.
If you actually go to certain countries such as, oh God, don't fail me now, Ray.
I mean, I can give you an example of a non-Western killer, like in Ukraine, Chikatilo.
Oh yeah, excellent. Yeah. Famous in Bosnia as well.
It's still Western. Ukraine is a Western society.
Not really, no.
Not anymore.
Slavonic.
No.
My goodness, they have NATO there. They have
NATO?
Nazi flags.
I wish we had NATO.
parading
We
all
wouldn't have
over
Russia in our
Kiev.
lands if we had NATO.
No,
yeah, Nazi flags. Yeah,
No,
Nazi flags
I
flying
just
all
want to
around
say-
Ukraine.
I just want to correct you.
Exactly.
That the
That's
only
what she
reason
means.
why we
NATO is the
see,
Nazi flag.
More like
According to her.
social serial
The
killers in the West is
mentality
just
of the
they
people
catch
is
more.
to parade with Nazi flags, and it's the only country
that's the exception.
in the world that has Nazi flags parading in the
That's
street.
not true. If you go to Sarajevo, you will see Nazi flags. That's
Not on the scale
Yes.
of Kiev.
Have you been in Kiev?
Madam.
Yeah, I've been.
Yeah, you've been. You've
I've
met the
been to
Nazis parading
Russia,
with the
I've
flags.
been to Poland.
Well, I've been in Kiev. I never saw any Nazi
Madam,
flags.
if you go to,
Sorry.
I think. Oh, please don't quote me. But very recently there was a pride parade in Sarajevo.
Yes.
And you had two. And of course you had the parade, right? And you had the parade. You had the anti-fascists. You had the Communist Party. You had the nationalists, and you had also like straight-out fascists, right? And all of these groups were present there. So these sort of delineations exist almost everywhere. So it is not like it's endemic or systemic to a
It's a
certain
matter
country.
of degree.
Sure,
Some
I would agree.
countries are far more right-wing than others.
Absolutely.
The population. I'm not talking about the authorities are all right-wing, of course.
But in every population,
they suck
fascism is
on
the
the
minority.
exploitation of the working class. They are automatically right-wing.
No, that's not true.
Well, give me an example
Right.
of a leadership that is more tolerant about the interchange of ideas among the population.
More than what?
More than what? What do I have to compare
Whose
to?
country? Whose leadership?
No, but more than
is
what?
Which country?
More tolerant,
More tolerant than who?
about the interchange of very progressive, very modern
yes, more
ideas.
tolerant than. Give me an example. Give me a baseline country, please.
Then which country? Yeah.
Well, for example, we live in a Western society.
Okay, United
We
Kingdom.
are Western masses. On a global scale, we represent ourselves as Western masses.
No, we don't.
Western masses, well, you have to make a judgment on the basis of what is going on.
Madam, where does the West begin?
The world has been globalized, and the Western masses have a self-interest of blocking immigration, of going back to very conservative ways.
Madam, Yeah, madam,
She
I'm so
shifted
sorry.
the
Madam, I'm so sorry.
Still morality.
No, madam, this
Not
is
really,
politics
no.
at this point, and
became very
I'm
superficial
very
now.
happy to argue politics at a different moment. But right now, this circle was primarily concerned with the philosophical ramifications of morality. These are the practical, political, and socioeconomic factors of how morality should play into them. I would love to discuss. I myself come from Yugoslavia. I was born in Yugoslavia. I still have a Yugoslavian passport. I have lived in social communism, in authoritarian governments, and I have lived in sort of liberal democracies, wherever. I have a good sort of lifelong experience
So
of
which
comparison.
morality did you develop
My
on
own.
the basis?
My own.
So it is subjective.
Excellent.
It is subjective, but it is subjective, and I already said it is subjective to the extent that every single actor is subjective, but you can go towards degrees of objectivity.
So what about the fact whereby it is far easier to understand right and wrong than understand morality?
That is a tautology, madam. Right and wrong and morality are basically the two same things.
Well, they are interlinked, but you understand.
No, they're the same.
People understand far better.
That's saying
right
like hot,
and
cold,
wrong
and temperature.
than
Okay, what's the
morality.
difference between right, wrong, and morality?
The difference is this. Right and wrong are clear-cut pattern of behavior that
Who
you
determines
can
that?
spot. Well, it is common sense. If somebody...
Oh, common sense is different in every
Common
single.
sense.
Common
Let
sense
me
varies from
explain.
region to region,
Let
from time
me
to time, from
explain what I
society to
mean
society.
for common sense. Whoever is refraining for inflicting suffering on other human beings, on animals, is
Who determines what's suffering?
is physical usually. For in case of human being, also psychological. But psychological comes much after, because the psychological pain, it's you and you only that inflict it upon yourself. Like this guy, I called him, you are a fascist, he got offended. It was
Maybe.
himself.
I don't know him.
It was himself that
Very offended,
inflicted,
you know. Like the sunglasses.
that inflicted the pain or from the harm of being called a fascist.
Okay.
Because when
that
somebody
wrong?
insults you,
Well, you just hurt him. Is that wrong?
Don't make the link. No, I'm saying as a pattern of
I'm sorry.
civilized pattern of behavior.
She
you
destroyed the conversation.
should not
The conversation
hook
is no more.
to insult.
She kind of
Once
destroyed
you
it, bro.
hook
She kind of
to
Can I ask you for a favor?
The superficiality
Can I
is
ask you
on
for a
another
favor?
level.
I really want to continue. I had a conversation with this gentleman before, and I want to kind of finish it. I think the two of you have some common ground and beef. Like, is it right if you continue? Yeah.
What you're saying,
Because that's what she
You said a lot. I'm so sorry. You said a lot.
She has a
Right
sickle and a
and wrong.
hammer between her eyes.
And that's
what do you
fine.
expect from
Don't-
such
that's
a
fine.
person?
Don't like she can't. Sorry.
Let's do only like thought experiments. Let's
Okay,
do
well,
apolitical.
Or like you wanna,
Should we?
Or do you want to switch to a different topic? Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
There you go. I might come in.
Nice.
And we'll be able to talk about what happened in Yugoslavia.
Yes, that's fine. I would be glad.
Because you said, I noticed you said you were from Yugoslavia.
Yes.
Which part?
So I
If
was.
that's not,
No, it's not a problem at all. So.
twins.
Yeah.
What?
That's what I like.
So I was born in Banja Luka, which is currently Bosnia and Herzegovina, the entity of Republika Srpska, to be as precise as possible.
And that's in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yes.
Okay. They had a referendum there originally when the country was breaking up, when Yugoslavia was breaking
Right.
up. And the majority who voted to be independent. But then there was, you had Serbian...
Several, we had, so what basically happened is that I could compare it to sort of the falling out the UK had with Ireland. So you had sort of like loyalists and you had sort of like reformists, right? What happened basically is that, yes, there was a referendum, majority chose...
independent.
To be independent. And so the first country to fall apart was Slovenia. This was a very peaceful, occurrence. There was only a little bit of fire on the border
The
because
only violence started when Croatia broke off because you had Serbians in Croatia.
that's actually I wouldn't say that's true. So there was violence way before that, right? And there was a lot of violence even before that. So I would only say that the armed conflict, the actual military interactions on a significant scale started then, but there was conflict and violence way before that. So there was conflict between the then Yugoslavian and Slovenian border. The violence was primarily over establishing the border and also the extradition of certain then still Yugoslavian army members out of the country, right? But like the conflict was minute.
Sure.
Like I wouldn't.
The main reason I was asking about this is
Right,
because
sure.
fast forwarding it to today,
Right.
is because you have the
More
organization.
than 25 years now, yeah.
You have the European Union,
Right.
and you have certain countries in Eastern Europe who are trying to be in the European
Right.
Union, but can't. And then you have countries to the east like Russia who don't want certain countries to come into the European
Right,
Union.
of course, yeah.
So I was curious with Bosnia, the overwhelming decision within the politics there. Is it to be part of the EU, or is it to be independent, or do they politically side with Russia?
I mean, let me tell you this. What's happening in UK? They want to be in the EU or not?
I was just going to ask you.
Oh, that depends where you're. If you're in London, most people want to be in the EU.
Same thing in
London.
Bosnia.
Okay, so it's
So same, like, look, you have to understand that, for instance, Bosnia and Herzegovina specifically is, I think, one of the most complex countries legally on the planet. We have like 3 fucking presidents. We have 2 entities, which is like a whole bag of worms on itself. We have a canton. We have an external legal body that mediates the 2 local bodies. We have different militaries. We don't even have a fucking military. We have different like.
you don't have a military.
Not exactly.
What UN says you can't have, or who says you can't have a military?
Well, let's say UN. So the thing is, like, you can have a military, right? But you cannot have a military that is on like the individual level, right? You can have policing on an individual level. So, for instance, Republika Srpska would have its own police force, and like you would have Bosnia, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina would have its own police force, and they have like their own investigation. Everything is splintered, right? It's the most one of the most splintered. No, it is the most splintered country in Europe, right? You would have one part of the country which has European inclinations for the reasons of reducing corruption, because any country entering the European Union, has to be under the gaze of certain anti-corruption and goodwill laws. You would have a stronger unification of the country under the European Union. You had better access to markets. And all in all, you would have a higher integration with the rest of the world, right? You would have a stronger passport. You have the ability to enter the Schengen. Beautiful things. Then you have a certain part of the country that is primarily Orthodox Serbian. The Orthodox Serbians, of course, share a lot in common historically, traditionally, and culturally with Russia. This is for the reasons of religion. They were also part of the Eastern Bloc. They also share a lot of common history in terms of just common enemies and common struggles. So whether it's the Ottoman Empire, whether it's the First World War, whether it's the Second World War, like a lot of common history. They are tending more toward a Eastern integration with the Eastern Bloc. So the Eastern Bloc would basically just be the Russia. They don't perceive other Eastern Bloc countries as much as their allies, although they have strong ties with them. So I would say, like, for instance, there's strong ties between like Bulgaria and, for some reason, I wouldn't know why, Japan. I have no idea why and how and what's going on there.
The region in Bosnia where most of the people of Serbian descent is, which region is that? The east?
It's kind of hard to so the country kind of has like a triangular or hard shape, and so the Serbian part is like sort of like a 7. It's like on the peripheries.
Okay.
And the sort of federational part is sort of like kind of lodged in there. It has a very, very weird border. So within the sort of Muslim delineation in the country, you have also two trains of thought, just like in the Serbian ones. You have those that are more oriented towards the Middle East, so that would be like Turkey, the United Emirates, and so on. And then you would have a delineation that is simply more oriented to Europe, because they don't see an issue with having a Muslim identity and being part of Europe, because they see why would there be like we're looking for more stable government, more integration, less corruption, right? The issue with that is some see, and this is on both sides, some see a stronger unification or stronger personal relation to either Europe, because God, we're in the same continent and very close to this. Some see it more towards Europe or the Middle East, and these are primarily either populist or just identitarian reasons, personal identitarian reasons, not broad identitarian reasons.
Has Bosnia made an application to be in the EU?
Yes.
Okay, so it's still pending. They're still.
It's going to be pending for many years, man.
Really?
Because to be part of the European Union, you need to meet a specific set of criteria, and you need to have proven to have goodwill to enter the country. And because the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina is so complex, and there's so much corruption, so many ongoing issues there, the list of things that Bosnia needs to meet to enter the European Union is like extensive. So I foresee Bosnia, if it doesn't break apart, joining the European Union. But on the other hand, by the other hand, I'll answer your question. But the other hand, you have countries, for instance, Croatia, or Slovenia, that have been part of the European Union for quite a while. The reason why these countries, for instance, had a much less difficult time integrating is simply because they have stronger ties to core EU members, and they had also stronger infrastructure left over by Yugoslavia, and they had simply a stronger and more unified national identity. So all of these things have been aligned better. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a very resource-dense country, ridiculously resource-dense country. Potable water, agricultural land, fertile land, a lot of woodland, and they also have a lot of hydro potential. They also have a lot of unmined areas that we know are rich with minerals. The main issue for exploration of natural resources in Bosnia, one of them, of course, among other political or monetary reasons, is simply that a lot of the country has never been demined. So a lot of the country, if you go through it like on a very liberal ride, like, you know, but I mean like you go in the boonies, you will come across like a sign that like has this skull, and underneath it'll say something in like, you know, in a language you don't understand. It means mines. Just don't go there, right? So.
But your country is not afraid that Russia might try and invade, like what they did with Ukraine.
No, it's too far away. The political interest and the cost-benefit analysis for Russia to go into Bosnia is, let's face it, compared to the abduction of Crimea, is minuscule. It is, I believe, for any country at the moment, Bosnia is more of a liability than a benefit, and there's a reason why they call the Balkans and the sort of the keg, powder keg of Europe, and in the Balkans you call Bosnia the powder keg of Europe. So doubly dangerous. It is just such an unstable country in so many regards. I do believe that there is a common future of Bosnia, although the conditions that need to be met and the goodwill that needs to be established for this to happen is just...
What is the relationship with the Serbs? Bosnia and the Serbs, what kind of relationship?
You mean the Republic of Serbia and Bosnia?
Yeah.
Bosnia and the Republic of Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina have a good trade relationship. It's a very established. There's a lot of import-export going on. There's a lot of cross investment going on. There's a lot of mobility of people in terms of just whether it's a trade or training. A lot of people go to Belgrade or to Novi Sad to get educated and return or stay there. The barrier for the cultural and language barrier, or just the cost of living difference between Bosnia and sort of Belgrade, Novi Sad, is not as significant as if you go to other European countries, with the exclusion of Vienna, because Bosnian students have free education in Vienna as reparation for the abduction. Yeah, because of the Austro-Hungarian Empire reparations. Yes.
How are the Bosnians? Sorry.
One last.
How are the Bosnians now dealing with the trauma of that war in the 90s? Because you mentioned one thing, which is reparations.
Yes.
From the Austro-Hungarian, but that's like way back. But
right.
With the war that took place, how are they dealing with it? Have bridges been built? Or because I was reading something really haunting about the mass rape of women and how a lot of those rapists have never been brought to justice. And sometimes in certain parts of Bosnia, some women claim that these neighbors who were involved in the rape are still walking around. And they mentioned them, you had different things. Some claimed they were Serbian, some claimed they were Croat, some claimed that they were... Because you had all these different factions.
Here's the truth. This was going on all sides. Everyone, look, for obvious reasons of politics, everyone will say the other guy is the bad guy, and the other side did more bad things. And I'm not going to argue who did more of what, right? This is a discussion that is a matter of, it's a matter of empirical data, right? I don't have the numbers, right? What I can say with certainty is this happened on all sides. There is no side that is innocent, and there is no side that is guilty. There is no side that is the victim. Everyone was the oppressor and the victim. This, of course, goes to varying degrees, right? There's no one who didn't experience either oppression or either persecution, right? There are no winners in this war. I personally believe there are no winners in war overall, but this is truly a war of zero-sum game. It was a collective loss to everyone. It could have been handled, well, coulda, shoulda, woulda. That's irrelevant.
But how are things in Bosnia? Are bridges being built, or people are like keeping quiet but keeping apart from other communities?
Well, they're not keeping quiet. So there's a lot of political unrest in the country on all sides. So there's a lot of political unrest within each national camp. So, for instance, in Bosnia, there's a lot of conflict between the position and the opposition, of corruption, of murder charges, of issues of justice, of issues of politics, and the same thing is being going on in the sort of the side of Federation. So I'll call them just the Republican Federation, kind of easy, instead of saying the full names, it's too long. In the Federation, for instance, protests are very common. And 2 years ago, we had massive demonstrations against just systemic corruption. I think the government was at hold for, I think, more than 2 months. Massive protests. If you just go onto, I think the most accessible journal for Western audiences to see what's going on in Bosnia is Al Jazeera. That's one of them, right? Just because Al Jazeera has gotten so big, right? And they do cover Bosnia in some degree. So if you go and look at their archives, you'll see how big the protests are, what they demand. Same thing is happening in Banja Luka not a year ago, where basically there was a murder charge of a child that just got blown out of proportions, that turned from a murder case into a political oppression and witch hunt, right? Of course, there was a lot of corruption, there was a lot of wrong play on both sides. At the end of the day, it was blown out of proportions as a witch hunt. And I'm not saying that nobody was guilty for the murder or that it was like irrelevant. I'm just saying that this was just an excuse for a much larger movement to just mobilize around common discontent.
To push their political agenda, they took advantage of it.
When it comes to sort of international relations within the country, like what's happening between the two sides, there is a certain element of business, right? Business is business, right? Numbers don't care who or what you are. As long as you're doing good business with me, I shake your hand, I bow my head, we develop very good relationships over time, we trade and we try to, increase our prosperity and the prosperity of our workers and our cohort. By cohort, I mean just our neighbors, right? If that means working with any side for any reason, magnificent. The more the better, right? So from that side, there has been a lot of peacekeeping, there has been a lot of integration between both sides just for business purposes. I think there's been building of more understanding in common relations between people. On the other hand, the scars of war are fresh. People who have been in the war as children or who have been in the war as teenagers, have their youth stolen by this war, still live and exist and are part of the broader public. Like, it's not like you have pensioners sitting in the park discussing about this. No, we have pensioners in the park sitting and discussing about the Second World War, yet alone, about the war that didn't happen less than 30 years ago.
Really?
So the the war generation is the current generation. So the wounds of war are still fresh. Not even fresh. They just had.
They've never healed.
They never healed. They just stopped bleeding. And and this sort of trickles down into a need for personal identity for a lot of young people. In a country that is so fragmented and just has, I don't want to swear, that has really bad perspectives for its youth, you need something to latch on to. You cannot really rely on the government. You need to rely on something. If you cannot rely on if you don't have a religious inclinations, then you might tend onto sports, and sports is so oriented towards nationalism.
Because they're trying to have a sense of identity, are they grabbing onto a mythical idea of what?
Yes, it's absolutely mythical. So there is a sort of joke, and I would say it goes beyond the joke to a meme, if you know what I mean, and that's called the Serbo amoeba. So there was a lot of junk science and sort of very politically opinionated, I don't want to call them artists, scientists, they're just publishers. They're not even fucking good writers. We're talking about, the Serbians being a divine, nation, God protects the Serbs and all this jazz.
Because a lot of that was being said before. Going all the way back to the Second World War.
So there is this mythology of that goes all the way back to the sort of Kosovo conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Kosovo, where it still gets retold and mythologized, and the actual occurrence of, for instance, Kosovo, which is such a monumental event in Serbian history. It's like the fall from grace, like the once mighty empire that surrounded that was in the Balkans, stretched all the way to Greece, fell in one battle. Of course, it didn't fall in one battle. It was like a slow decay, just like the Ottoman Empire afterwards. But it's such a mythical event, and the excuses and the reasons why this happened are so mythologized that the actual perception from the actual historical truth has been severely divorced. There are some people who actually understand what happened and are still entrenched in this identity just because of personal reasons, whatever they may be. I don't want to speculate on their part. But there's a mythology. I mean, just the fact that you have a word like such as Serbo-Amoeba, which basically means like the original people and all of that stuff. We've seen this so many times in so many different contexts that it should be laughable, but it's not. It persists.
And do they have a political party?
Who?
With these people who are taking on that belief?
I mean, they have literal war criminals as part of their sort of. I mean, this is very recent. These are the war criminals that actually got released from prison, who served their sentences. And okay, war criminal, some people might argue with me, like, are they war criminals? They were released, you know, some of the charges were dropped. And I'm like, look, if you had a list of like 100 crimes and like 50 of them dropped, there's still 50, like that doesn't make it better, fine. Like, and this is happening on both sides. I'm not saying one side is like, I think, oh man, it's just cancer.
It's scary though, because I don't want it to happen again.
Oh, well, just a matter of time.
Oh, man.
No, look. Unification and Balkanization, oh man, like, even the word Balkanization got named after us. The word Balkanization happens everywhere all the time. Like, no empire is going to last forever, right? And like, changes is going to happen. And I'm not really worried about change in anywhere in the world, like Bosnia, even the UK. I might not agree with every decision any country makes, but they have the right to make this decision, right? And the only thing of importance is how we deal with these changes, and how we address them, and how we go forward, right? The unification and division of Berlin could have been much bloodier than it was, but it wasn't, right? It was handled relatively well, right? The division between Serbia and Montenegro was handled well. Division between Slovenia and Yugoslavia was handled well. Division of East and South Sudan was handled. North and South Sudan was handled well. No, these things can happen. These things happen. They will happen. Every empire fell down. The only thing that really matters is how you handle it. There will always be demographic changes. Change is the only thing that is constant. It is just how we handle it. And as long as there is no unnecessary violence, because politics mandates violence to some extent, because we need to police certain people. So I mean, like in places like Mostar literally means bridge. It's like the bridge city.
Mostar, where's that?
Mostar is in it is in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is divided throughout ages by this one bridge. And like the only Nobel Prize winner, Yugoslavian Prize Nobel winner, was Ivo Andrić, and he was a writer. His most famous work was Nadrini Ćuprija, which basically just means, it talks about this bridge in Mostar, the divide that was built and that divided, first, the sort of Austro-Hungarian Empire with the sort of like loyalists. Then it's divided, the Serbian and the Muslim part, and so on and so forth. And like, there's always this central division around this bridge, and I think it's such a.
So then, should the country break up? Because it seems too many people of diversity are being forced together.
It is. Look, man, you have a lot of diversity in a lot of countries.
I'm not saying that's what I would want.
No. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm not just saying. What I would say is that whether they want to break up or not should be the choice of the people. And if they just cannot find a way to coincide, they should break up, have autonomy, but remain. Have strong bilateral relations, right? That's fine. Like it's like with Ireland and the UK. You can absolutely have the system and have certain cantons that are neither here nor there become like Northern Ireland, or like a place like Mostar. Make Mostar Northern Ireland in a way, right? Where you would have a ground where you can have this sort of system of regional governments. That is not mandatory or enforceable, but just, advisory. Okay, we need this. Let's work on this because we both need this highway. This hydropower plant goes through both, like this river goes through both territories. We need the hydropower. Both of us need, let's organize this. Like this.
So then you would have to make sure people within that government, you represented everyone within
Sure, but if you had the division, then you would have already this kind of separation, wouldn't you? So I don't think this is necessary. I have no problem living in well, I don't live it now there, but I wouldn't have a problem being in Bosnia and living in Bosnia and having a multiple identity instead of in being like a citizen of Republika Srpska, having a Croatian and a Bosnian passport, and like being all of those things. Like we all speak the same language. We don't need it. Like a lot of people say Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, Bosnian. It's not the same language. I'm like, do you need a translator when you speak to each other? Like a fucking Australian person from the UK or from the US or Canada.
You understand each other.
No, it's the same fucking language. Let's be honest. It's like imagine the United States said we speak American, or Canadians say we speak Canadian, or Australians saying we speak Australian, right? In a way, you could say, okay, yeah, I mean, you have your own sort of accent, you have your own sort of.
We would just be on. So in Croatia, the Croats, they speak the same language as the people in Bosnia.
Sure.
And the people in Serbia speak the same language as those in Croatia.
Sure, but they would never say it's the same language, although it is. Like you wouldn't need a translator between them. It's like French and Canadian French. It's bullshit. Like, but the problem is that the original language was Serbian, right? That's the problem. The person that sort of established the alphabet and the grammatical basis for it was Vuk Karadžić, who was traditionally Serbian and who was educated in Germany and borrowed a lot from the German language and worked a lot to establish a common grammatical system. And the sort of local, regional, I don't want to call it tribes, but like the regional people just accepted it as a language. It was very practical, it was useful. The only tragedy of this is that it's called Serbian, which has sort of like connotations with it. Let's say that the language was called Balkan. We speak Balkanese.
Yeah.
No one would fucking say I speak Croatian. They would be like, what? I speak Balkanese. Only because it's called Serbian originally is it a problem. And only because of this delineation we have this sort of conflict. And a lot of people would say, no, but that's just them, trying to pull their head further into their ass. Oh. I finally managed to break.
Well, I'm grateful you cleared that up for me, because I always wanted to, because I watched documentaries on that area, but then when I saw that actually a real life person from that region is here, I just had to ask for your questions.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time.
I'm by the way an exception to this. I'm the most atypical person you'll find from Bosnia.
Really?
Because I mean, I have a Croatian passport. My dad is Serbian. I live in the Serbian part. I mean, I also have a Bosnian passport, just as a matter of fact, being born there. My first passport was just like a note in my mom's passport, who was like, Croatian. My lineage, my grandfathers and his grandfather, they were from the Czech Republic, and from the other side, they're partially Russian. The Balkans is such a mixing pot of everything, and we have so much more in common than we have against each other, but, interest divides everyone, if you want.
I hope it gets better there, because what happened in the 90s was scary. Even though I wasn't even there, and I'm not even I wasn't part of Yugoslavian or from the Balkans. What I saw, the documentaries, the news, was scary. The massacres. Yep. So,
look, man, the shit that happened in Ireland was scary.
Yeah.
Like, I would consider that scary, and then you turn around and like look at Bosnia, and then you're like, oh shit, this is Europe, man. Like, it's not cool. I mean, it's not cool anywhere, but just the fact that, we expect a certain standard from European countries, and we have this upholding ideal of the old continent, that wasn't supposed to happen. But it happens everywhere, it will continue happening. I just hope we deal with it in a better way.
All right. Thanks very much.
It was a pleasure speaking with you, Mr.
Just call me Preston.
Preston.
And your name?
Bojan.
Bojan.
It was a pleasure meeting you, Preston.
Probably see you around. I'm still going to be there.
Off camera.
Content over everything from your humanity.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
That Adam did this, and then let me finish. My brother, let me finish. You're telling me humanity was sinful, but God sent His only Son to die for humanity's sin.
That is
but
great.
The Bible
that is great.
No,
that is the moral
that's
of
injustice.
No, that